afternoon. Welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community with news, information, and resources that we hope will help improve your life. I'm Stu Reed with my co-host, Dave Bernstein. Hey, Dave.
Hello.
What's going
Things
on?
good here. What's going on?
Uh,
Well,
you had a story that just piqued my interest about black women, healthy black women, and getting C-sections in hospitals. What is that story, Dave?
that just came across from the Times. It looks well researched and it's horrifying. It's one of the most offensive stories I've read. The heading is Healthy Black Women are often given unneeded C-sections, studies suggest. And the tagline, the operations were more likely to happen when hospitals had no scheduled C-sections, suggesting a financial incentive, the study said. We always had the fear that doctors were doing what pays them well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I can't imagine anything making it more clear than this one. I was born by C-section.
Mm-hmm.
And 40 and 50 years later, my mother was complaining about the adhesions she had that were almost definitely a result of the C-section.
Wow.
The C-sections are done under enough anesthesia, I guess, that it doesn't hurt while you're doing it. It goes much faster. It means you can have the baby whenever you and the doctor want it instead of the middle of the night. But they're not innocent operations. They're serious.
Yeah. Wow. That
Yeah.
I guess we really shouldn't be all that surprised. I mean, black folk are so often on the cutting edge of experimentation in healthcare, and that we would be on the cutting edge of some of the financial procedures. That doesn't surprise me a whole lot, Dave.
Doesn't
Another
surprise
related.
anybody, but it's still horrifying
Oh, it is horrifying. It's
to see
ridiculous.
approved.
And you
And I'm
you
sure it's
go to
not
the
just black
hospital,
women.
and we trust doctors. Doctors are in some ways are like priests. We believe in them. We trust their judgment. If they tell us this is what we need, we go with it. But to hear that the financial concern is really driving the behavior, it's very disconcerting. And although this story doesn't touch upon it, we know that there's a lot of drug prescription activity going on in much the same way, where doctors are prescribing drugs in some cases where they may or may not be needed, Dave, because they're incentivized by the drug companies to do that. So, we've talked before about just how, money and the whole capitalist incentive in healthcare really does not work to people's benefit.
And an unfortunate piece of news, England has had more and more private hospitals and private doctors, even though the National Health Service there is a model for the world.
mm,
Lately, Thatcher and the succeeding governments have cut off their money and they've been shorthanded. But I had a problem when I was in England a few years ago. It was amazing to see how kind and efficient they were.
wow.
China, for whatever reason, has just decided to allow American hospital chains to come in and build private hospitals.
Mm,
Not good.
yeah, I wonder how that's going to work. Now, another related story, Dave, is about psychiatric patients in Florida. An outfit called Acadia Healthcare in Florida is wrongly holding patients against their will to maximize insurance payouts. This is a New York Times investigation, another Times story. It says that, since the pandemic exacerbated the national mental health crisis, this company, Acadia Healthcare, their revenue has soared and its stock price has more than doubled. And much of this is a result of this company, Acadia, who lures patients into their facilities and holds them against their will, Dave, even when detaining them is not medically necessary. And so they say some
It
patients.
was usually only for a week, but
Oh,
even
okay.
a
Oh,
week
you
in a
only blocked me up
psychiatric
for a week. Oh, okay,
hospital
not so
can
bad.
be
Come on, Dave.
horrifying.
Come on. I mean, they say
Yeah.
some patients arrive in the emergency room seeking routine mental health care, only to find themselves sent into the Arcadia facilities and locked in. Come on, man. This is this sounds like something from the 19th century, locking up mental health patients, but not because society is scared or accusing them of witchcraft or anything like that, which maybe they did 100 years ago. But now the reason is more money. Wow.
I think you have a question for me.
Okay, yeah. What is going on? A lot of big news, a lot of big trumpeting I'm hearing about. Apple made a big announcement, a big fanfare. What is going on in mobile phones, Dave? Is it anything going
Well,
on or is it just smoke?
the Apple mobile phone is basically a dud. It's
It's a
like
dud?
everything Apple.
Did you say dud?
It's a dud. It's like everything Apple. It's an excellent piece of work.
Hmm.
It's a little bit better than last year's. They talk up to 17% faster. But I put that third in my stories coming from Apple and the mobile world. The first one is one that we were among the early folks to report here. Huawei, a few hours after the Apple announcement, announced something that Apple isn't even close to, a trifold phone. It unfolds. It's a regular phone for when you want it that way. It unfolds to a 10-inch tablet, high resolution, presumably working well. They just started taking orders,
Oh, they
and
are taking
4
orders.
million people
Wow.
put reservations in.
Wow. I know, Dave.
Despite,
You mentioned it a week or two ago on the show that the CEO of Huawei was spotted on an airplane using this gizmo, and there's a lot of speculation, but no product announcements. Now saying this device is now available. Is that what you're saying?
they're shipping in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And as I say, 4 million reservations. I assume it will work well and not fall apart and not have reliability problems. We don't know that till you get 100,000 of them out there. And it has one unfortunate aspect. It's $2,800 US. Of course,
Well,
it's not being sold in the
I was
US.
gonna say, can we even get them here? We're given all the embargoes and tariffs and hysteria about anti-Chinese hysteria, particularly anti-Huawei.
Uh, I'm sure there are ways, and last I looked, which was maybe a year ago, there were several sellers on Amazon selling Huawei phones that they would buy in Latin America where they're being sold pretty cheap because of the market and resell them on Amazon. Uh, but we, it may very well get worse. Right now, many things in the United States cost more because we make it hard to get the Chinese stuff. China no longer has a big wage advantage. I mean, there's a big difference, but that's not the explanation. China has the most aggressively competitive capitalist companies in the world, even
Wow.
though the government
That's
occasionally
that's a
reins
stunning
them in.
statement, Dave. That's a stunning statement. So-called communist China, or at least if you listen to the rhetoric of this country, you saying it has some of the most aggressive capitalist companies? Is that what you just said, Dave?
Absolutely and totally.
Wow.
Right now, there are price wars going on in electric cars, and on average, they're at least $5,000 less expensive than in the US.
Hmm.
Tesla had to drop its prices, and Tesla's overall sales are down, even though China was a big part of their market for a long time. Let's go to let's go to electric cars. Electric cars probably are important in climate control. They use less energy, and this is what's important. The giant plants that make electricity often have good filters, and more of them are solar and wind. And now we're starting to see some new nuclear. No carbon dioxide getting into the atmosphere. That's a good thing. Lots of noise in the United States about how electric cars are necessary. California is putting dates on where you can't drive anything else. What percent of the cars in the United States this year do you think are electric?
Are you talking about newly produced this year? I
Yeah,
don't know.
being
I
sold
would
this year.
guess 20%.
Actually, it's 8%, last
Oh,
number
wow.
I just saw.
Okay.
In Europe, it is numbers like 13% and 17%.
Hmm.
We can't even keep up with the French and the Italians on this.
Hmm.
What do you think the number in China? Cars sold in August, which I just saw. And China is the largest auto market in the world,
Yeah, I bet it's approaching 50%.
53%. So if you really care about climate change, you want to find a way to change those numbers. On the other hand, if you're Donald Trump, in fact, we currently, not officially, but de facto, are blockading any of the Chinese electric cars. The Europeans are putting tariffs on them.
Hmm.
And that is very negative from the point of view of climate change.
Hmm.
Now, what percent of the electricity added in China in the last year is renewable? Mostly solar, a little bit of wind.
Hmm.
Well, China's adding 20 million cars a year, and it's still industrializing at 5 to 10% a year. So the demand for electricity actually is going up still fairly fast, and they're meeting it. 80% of that is solar power
Wow.
and wind power. Uh, and the Chinese companies, as I say, they're really competitive. A few of them said, we're going to bring our costs down by building giant factories, which often works. And they did. They now can produce supposedly twice as many solar panels as they can find a market for. They are dumping them in places like Germany so cheap. Where do you put a solar panel if you want one in your home?
Well, traditionally you put them on your rooftop, but I know just talking to you, folks are starting to put them on their balconies, on
They're
their
now so
porches,
cheap.
and any place that has a look at the sun.
Yep. The solar panels in Germany are now so cheap that people are buying a kit, bringing it home, putting them on their balcony, and hooking up and getting their money back in the electricity savings over times, as well as feeling good about the climate.
Okay, now that's another item that the U.S. is tariffing or blocking coming in here, Dave. Those that really glut of Chinese solar panels. Is that right?
Yep. So
Hmm.
the Chinese are coping. They are massively selling to places like Thailand and Vietnam and Latin America.
Hmm.
It turns out when you look at the geopolitics, about 40% of the world is mostly going along with the United States and our Cold War against China, if you include India, which is 1.4 billion people. The rest of the world, they don't want to pay more for their cars, solar panels, and everything else because the United States is having an economic war with the Chinese.
Yeah, Dave, it
And in
sounds
fact,
like a losing proposition in the long run, but I guess often we don't operate with the long run lens strategically in this country. It's quarter to quarter, year to year, and it sounds to me the more we talk about this stuff, sounds like we're just kind of digging ourselves in a hole here.
well, there's lots of things in China that if I were Chinese, I'd be very offended by. And I might have been out on the streets uh, and getting arrested at different points in Chinese history. And I actually know some Chinese history, including what happened in 1965 and 1975 and 1959. which is even worse than you can imagine from the propaganda. But they also do many things right, and we both can learn from each side. Let's
Now,
get
Dave,
back to
before we segue too far away, we're talking about alternative power. I saw this story that you put in front of us about a sailing cargo ship, one of the
oh yeah,
largest of its kind, delivering 1,000 tons of cognac and champagne across the Atlantic from France, and
it
it's
may have been
powered.
1,000 cases. I don't. Maybe it was 1,000 tons. I don't
So
remember. The news.
unless the
We're
story got
going by a
misprinted,
news
it says a
story.
thousand tons.
If it said 1,000 tons, it probably
Yeah,
was. I
as
wouldn't send you a
reported by
news
New
story that didn't
Scientist.
seem legitimate. And it landed in New York a few days ago,
Hmm.
unloaded, went back to France, and is the company is planning to build 7 more. Why? Oh, and they all have electric motors in case there's an emergency, but they try not to use them because
Powered by
fuel.
wind. I mean, that's going back 300 years in terms of technology, Dave. Wow, that's amazing. But you know what I saw here, maybe you can kind of break some of this down for us. It says, look, I'm reading the story. It says, thanks to satellite communication and routing technology, wind is more predictable, which makes it a reliable source of propulsion. That's kind of stunning. Saying that the technology can now predict. We know ahead of time where the winds are and how to take advantage of them.
Heck, technology here in New York usually can predict whether it's going to rain 2 days from now. It
Okay.
used to be you couldn't trust the forecast for the same
Yeah.
afternoon.
Yeah. No.
And this is before they got to the artificial intelligence. The
I
models
often
the weather guys
quote
have are getting
my
really
daughter,
good.
Dave. She used to say, "Dad, the weatherman is a liar."
And that's
They've gotten
something
much better. They have gotten better.
that we grew up not trusting the weatherman
Hmm.
for good reason. They got it wrong a whole lot of the time. They still get it wrong occasionally, but usually they don't. Usually they tell you 2 and 3 days ahead and they get it right.
Yeah, but now the apparently
And
the
it's getting
technology
better.
is so good, they've got this they can power a ship across the Atlantic with wind. That's kind of a stunning achievement. No, I mean, maybe not so much. I mean, before there were diesels and electric motors and steam power. That's how all the ships cross the Atlantic. But it seems to me that this must be a leap, technological leap ahead of where we were back then. And you talk about the carbon footprint, in China. Apparently, this ship, the carbon footprint is 1/10 of a standard container ship. That's pretty amazing, 10 to 1.
Well, there's a lot of things that make it more possible now. And I'm not an expert on this at all. But ships in general, including oil tankers, have far smaller crews these days
Hmm.
because most of what the ship needs to do is automated.
Hmm.
And that brings down the cost. Uh, Sailing ships actually competed against steamships quite successfully for about 50 years.
Hmm.
Uh, we're talking about 1860 to World War One. And we both have a sense of that. Where were you in 1976?
1976, that was the year of the centennial. I was in New York City, Upper
And there
West
was
Side.
one heck
I
of a
remember
parade up the river.
all those ships up and down the Hudson. That's right. Yeah.
There's, there's still a couple of dozen tall ships
Hmm.
on the water. Many of them are used for things like training naval cadets and so on.
Hmm.
There very few are being used to do cargo.
Hmm.
But when you realize how big they are and how much they could carry, they were a powerful technology.
Hmm.
And these three-masted ships with huge sails, they had no trouble going from New York around Cape of Good Hope. No, yes, Cape of Good Hope, Straits of Magellan, and to China in 1985. How do I know that? Because one of the big things that happened right after our Revolutionary War is that we had some competitive capitalists here, mostly in Boston. So they built some very big ships. They sort of informally competed with each other of who can get to China first. Now, coming from China, you got coffee and tea and something we call China, porcelain, which was still the best in the world, and many other things. What did they take to China? The Chinese didn't need to import very much, but the American ships brought ice.
Ice?
Yep,
Wow. Really?
yep. And they were well insulated. They survived for weeks, and ice was a delicacy. Ice cream was a great delicacy in Roman times.
Wow. I
Because
never heard
very
that
few,
one, Dave.
yeah, very few people could afford to ship it. There was no good way. Shipping was so slow.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know how much of what we sent over was ice, but I remember seeing that when I was reading the history.
You
Uh,
know, the story about the cargo container did not talk about how long that trip across the Atlantic took. I'd be interested in comparing, the sailing time using the old technology versus today. Maybe we can dig
well,
around and bring
the
that to the
advantage of
air
knowing
next
where
week.
the winds are and heading to where the winds are,
Hmm.
which is exactly what good sailors do, has probably brought it down to something closer to 14 to 20 days.
Hmm.
Back in the days of sailing ships, as
That's
people
not for a
came
month,
over
right?
the Atlantic, it usually was a month.
Yeah.
And if you didn't catch the right winds, some ships were out there for 6 and 8 weeks before they got to New York.
Hmm.
And some of them didn't have supplies and people died. So having the good weather forecast. Now, nobody had a reason to get great weather forecast across the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans until now, because among other things, the ships going across had really strong engines and they could go through the weather. Now there's a reason to get that weather because, among other things, part of figuring out the weather in New York is knowing what's happening 200 and 400 miles offshore and predicting hurricanes needs that.
Right.
And so we've been putting up weather satellites for the last 40 years, and they go all over the earth. So there's no reason not to grab that data
Hmm.
when they're going over the ocean. And the big computers can really handle them. Now, there is a new model from Google. This has not been confirmed, but they are working with some of the biggest weather bureaus in the world, the central one in Europe, and they claim that their artificial intelligence model is slightly better than the models that the weather people have been building for the last 50 years.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
AI comes to the weather man, huh?
AI for the weather is definitely working. It's got a problem because the models that people are using are so good, it was hard to top them.
Hmm.
Uh, but that's all there. How much time do we have before
We,
the
we
break?
probably should take our break here, Dave. You got a couple minutes if you wanted to slip something in before we go to break.
Well, let me go quickly to two
Okay.
stories that we intended to put in as we did the mobile. One of them is that the Apple has lots of noise about artificial intelligence, which is going to be a good thing. I could talk to my friend in France talking English, and she would hear it in French live on something like the iPhone, although the iPhone didn't show that. But it wasn't very impressive. Samsung was just as good in January. Google has something as good as what Apple put out a few months ago, and so does Huawei. So they really didn't get their AI together. But there was one remarkable thing in the Apple announcement
Yeah, what's
that could
that?
make a difference to many of our listeners.
Hmm.
They're modifying the AirPod, the Pro 2 model, mostly with software, to use it as a commercial grade hearing aid for people with mild and moderate difficulty hearing.
Wow.
Now, given that hearing aids often cost $2,000 and $4,000, that is a wonderful thing to have happened. It's $250. They have all the data in at the FDA, expecting the approval to come in before the end of the year. And you can buy a $250 AirPod, which is really good to listen to music to, and shortly have a hearing aid.
Wow.
Now, Jenny complains, I don't hear her all the time. I've actually had a professional hearing test, and they said I was okay, but I should keep watching it. But Jenny thinks I don't hear, so I should get one of these.
Okay, we're looking forward to your personal review there, Dave. Okay. Okay, this is Community and Technology on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem, with Dave Bursey and Stu Reed. We're going to take a brief musical break and be right back. Stay tuned.
Vem Magalenha Rojão, traz a lenha pro fogão, vem fazer armação. Hoje é um dia de sol, alegria de coió, é curtir o verão.
Vem Magalenha Rojão, traz a lenha pro fogão, vem fazer armação. Hoje é um dia de sol, alegria de coió, é curtir o verão.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Vem Magalenha Rojão, traz a senha pro TTT coração. Hoje é um dia de sol, alegria de xodó, meu dever de verão.
Vem Magalenha Rojão, traz a senha pro fogão, TTT coração. Hoje é um dia de sol, alegria de xodó, meu dever de verão.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Calango, lango, no calango da pretinha, tô cantando essa mudinha pra senhora se lembrar daquele tempo que vivia lá na roça com uma filha na barriga e outra filha pra criar.
Calango, lango, no calango da pretinha, tô cantando essa mudinha pra senhora se lembrar daquele tempo que vivia lá na roça com uma filha na barriga e outra filha pra criar. Calango, lango, no calango da pretinha, tô cantando essa mudinha pra senhora se lembrar daquele tempo que vivia lá na roça com uma filha na barriga e outra filha pra criar.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Vem Magalenha Rojão, traz a senha pro fogão, TTT coração. Hoje é um dia de sol, alegria de xodó, meu dever de verão.
Vem Magalenha Rojão, traz a senha do fogão, TTT coração. Hoje é um dia de sol, alegria de xodó, meu dever de verão.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay, we're back. Community and Technology with Dave Bursey and Stu Reed here on WHCR 90.3 FM. Dave, there was a kind of a breakthrough story, maybe a little surprising to some, given all that we're hearing on the political dialogue about extreme drop in crime. What's the deal on that?
Well, I don't think it made the front page of the Times. I don't think the political candidates are talking about it, but we just got the numbers for August, and gunshot wounds and murders in New York City in August were the lowest they've been in 30 years.
Wow,
So that
30
why
years. Wow.
there's all this noise about crime. It's actually gone down. It's half of what it was when we were younger here in New York. And New York went down 13% against last year.
Hmm.
That's not as good as the rest of the nation. The nation overall is down 17% in
Wow.
murders. Uh, so you're going to hear a lot of politicians saying a lot of things, and you still have to be careful in dangerous alleys and so on.
Mhm.
But actually, things are getting better on crime, except internationally, where you can put together a group and do all kinds of things.
Yeah, that segues right into a follow-up. I know we talked last week about the arrest of the CEO of Telegram and Pavel Durov, Russian-born founder of the platform, arrested in France. Um, the Times, the New York Times, did a follow-up investigative story and laid out some incredible stuff about this operation, Dave. I had no idea that they were as involved as they are with so much nefarious activity. To begin with, they have over 1 billion users, and they pride themselves on behaving differently from the other tech peers. They're based in Dubai, and they have just 60 full-time employees for such a huge operation, Dave. And one of the things that they seem to pride themselves on is they ignore most requests from law enforcement. And they've got so much going on the platform. I'm now kind of referencing some of the stuff that the New York Times uncovered with that investigation. They found 1,500 channels operated by white supremacists who coordinate activities among almost 1 million people across the planet. Hamas and ISIS and other terror groups thrive on Telegram. There are more than 40 channels associated with Hamas, and they were very active. They Telegram in showing videos of the raid in Gaza back and rather in Israel back on October 7th. Apparently, very big on violent depiction, violent, I won't say recreation, but violent showing of what was going on over there, uncensored.
Well, it
And
looks like you can get drugs much cheaper there.
yeah, all drugs,
And
all
I
drugs,
live a few
weapons,
blocks
all
away
kind of
from
contraband.
116th Street, which was the drug capital of the world once upon a time. But it sounds like it's cheaper online.
Much cheaper online and much broader. I mean, they've got all kinds of gun selling, illicit narcotics, prescription drugs, fraudulent ATM cards, clone cards, and all kind of contraband that you basically can't find anywhere else. Maybe on the street, but here it is selling online. And they started something called this is Telegram again. They started something, Dave, called a super group, which the Times kind of harkened back to the AOL chat rooms back in the day when the internet was an infant. Most of the apps like WhatsApp have kept the chat group sizes in the hundreds, but apparently Telegram has chat groups as large as 200,000 users. And they use these groups to talk about, they cultivate the community to talk about all kinds of licit and illicit things. And I just have a quote from Bragg, who's the DA here in New York. We know about Bragg. And he's quoted as saying, "I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but I think the combination of a number of things, the encryption, the ability to reach large numbers of people, the ability to set up subgroups, and the posture towards law enforcement creates an environment which is not surprising that is criminal activity, where it's not surprising that criminal activity is occurring." And not only is it occurring, it seems to be thriving, Dave. Um, I don't know, the CEO who was arrested is making all kinds of gestures and statements, to the effect that, oh, we're cleaning it up, we're trying to do everything we can to kind of rationalize and get rid of some of this negative stuff that's going on. But it looks like, one, his staff is so slim. They have few to no moderators. It sounds unbelievable. It doesn't sound credible, his statements. What's your take?
Well, just a few things to add to that. First of all, Elon Musk, for the last 3 weeks at Twitter, they've been working on it presumably for 6 months, started setting up a system of groups, like that super groups
Oh,
for
wow.
Twitter
Okay.
users.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't know this, but I'm sure he didn't know this one was coming, but it's there. I got a tweet from Twitter saying, please join our group, such and such. The other part of it is something that you should know if you want to use Telegram. If, for example, you're thinking of rebelling against a dictator in Syria, it is not that secure.
Mm.
When I put out some of the early stories on Telegram, I got a note from Charles Mock, who, having been active in Hong Kong, knew a lot about what you had to do to make sure the authorities didn't intercept what you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
He's now at Stanford. And he said, we shouldn't make so much of a thing about Telegram and encryption because their encryption doesn't work very well. And in fact, the Times had that story that, contrary to, for example, what Apple is doing on the iPhone, which is encryption they can't touch, Telegram can break into the accounts, find what you thought was secret and encrypted, and in fact had done that to keep tabs on some ex-employees for some reason. So, if you are plotting a revolution, you want to do just what the big Coke dealers do. Think of getting Signal or doing your own encryption, because Telegram is not as reliable as you think.
Yeah, but then you got to have somebody that's going after it. I mean, the Telegram internally, rather than going after these bad actors, they're going after employees. I mean,
But that means they can do it. That shows
yeah,
they can do it.
they can do it, but the fact that they can do it doesn't seem to be in any way impacting all the illicit activity, Dave, that's going on across the platform. The
Well,
Time story talked about a guy who was arrested in prison in December 2022, serving a 33 months prison sentence in a federal prison. And he's using smuggled cell phones and Telegram, continuing his illicit trade on Telegram. Selling illegal firearms and weapons parts. I mean, so what if you can break encryption? The law enforcement is not doing anything or not doing much to go after these guys, or so it seems.
well, if you listen to Durov and believe him, that's in the process of changing. As he got out of jail in France, he's out on 5 million euros bail and not allowed to leave the country. He said that they're going to have to change their policies. They're going to have more moderators, getting rid of the really ugly stuff, and they're going to have to cooperate with police around the world. Whether they actually do that, time will tell.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in the meantime, they've been called that has the anonymity of the dark web with the ease of use of an online marketplace. Um, Illegal guns, illicit narcotics, prescription drugs, all kind of stuff going on. So, we'll see whether or not Mr. Durov is serious about that, Dave. It sounds like the operation is so sprawling. I mean, they're going to have to really do some major surgery on the platform to really make any kind of impact.
Yeah, 300 million regular users is a lot. And I think the number is actually higher than that.
Yeah, I mean, the Times reported up to 1 billion users. And that says they're approaching 1 billion users. That's a lot of users. And I can't imagine that they're going to do a whole lot to decrease that usership, Dave. I mean, I'm not sure what their revenue model is, but it's got to be somehow related to the number of users.
And if I were Elon Musk, I would make a point of not letting my jet take me to Brazil for a party. Musk does a whole lot of parties. I don't know a whole lot, but he goes to some really wild parties and has talked about it. Because there, the government wants to get him. They've ordered him to censor some accounts. On Twitter, he not merely has refused to do that, he started calling the democratically elected president of Brazil a dictator, one of the worst dictators in the world, or something like that, he said, and said he wanted to meet him in a cage fight. So I hope Elon Musk doesn't go to Brazil to make that happen.
Yeah. I don't think he will, Dave. It sounds like, he's a master at PR. Sounds like he is just making a good story. Just the finish up with Telegram. One of the, I guess this is the Times reporter, is saying that if former President Donald Trump loses in November, we need to understand that Telegram will probably be a substantial infrastructure for extremists who want to do something about it. So, need to keep our eye on that one.
And they're not just in Germany. Although in the latest election in Germany, the folks that many people call neo-Nazis did incredibly well.
Yeah.
And it's based on hatred of immigrants. I happen to be Jewish. I know what a scapegoat is. Anytime you look at it, it turns out that immigrants, whether in the United States or in Germany, are less likely to commit crimes and be arrested because they're too busy struggling to earn a living and survive.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
But don't tell that to some of the people in U.S. politics or German politics.
Yeah. Okay, well, let me just, speaking of crime, more on the white collar side. North Carolina man, Dave, was recently charged with a $10 million AI music streaming fraud scheme. And this guy was using AI to generate songs and streaming bots. And I'm not sure how he made his money, but he was fraudulently collecting over $10 million in music royalties using AI to generate the songs and the bots to stream them out. That's amazing.
Well, a lot of things there. One of the things is it's straightforward. At Google, YouTube, they are paying big money, sometimes into the millions, for people who have a lot of followers. Pandora and Spotify pay a lot of money, like 70% of their revenues goes to an organization that passes it on to the record companies and some of it to the musicians. So yes, record companies now are more profitable than they were before Napster and the internet got everybody taking music.
Really, Dave, Dave, are you saying they are more profitable than?
More profitable.
Wow,
They
that's
almost
because
were
of all the
bankrupt
streaming
10 or
royalties.
15 years ago. And the music royalties from the big web companies
Mhm.
it's most of the explanation.
Wow.
And it's so much that, yeah, they're doing much better.
Mhm.
The other thing is, would you want to listen to songs that were written by an AI?
I don't think so, Dave. I'm really into people-generated music, and I really kind of focus on the artist and the culture from which that artist comes, and the cultural background out of which the music kind of flows. So the answer to your question is no, I wouldn't be interested in that. Now, could I be fooled? Perhaps so. Could I be tricked into believing that some AI generated stuff really came from the depth of a person's soul? Perhaps so.
This, almost everybody who really thinks about it believes that the AIs are not conscious and probably won't be soon. However, it's really hard to tell
Mm.
because whether or not they're conscious, they're getting so good that they can fool most people, including me. So that the AIs, it's a philosophical question. In fact, the philosophers have gotten into, like David Dennett, have gotten into this big time. What does it mean to be intelligent, conscious, alive? That's a different show than this one.
Yeah, yeah.
But they've gotten so good that they can be like people. Now, I've listened to a little bit of this electronic music. Jenny is using some of the AI voices in actual production. The voices are that good that she's happy to use them there.
Hmm.
Didn't have a budget for an actor, so she went to 11 labs.
Hmm.
Uh, so I've listened to some of it. It is not that bad. It is like the popular music. It is particularly bland and uninteresting most of the time. But when a good musician works with that as a tool, uh, they're going to be generating really good stuff. And frankly, most of the top 40 is pretty bland and uninteresting.
I have to
Remember,
agree with you on
I
that one,
have to
Dave.
have a minute for the kicker in the show,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
let me know
Well,
when.
before we go to the kick, I want to do one other story. We're talking about consciousness and intelligence. An interesting story about the marmoset monkeys. And apparently they have used AI to sort through something like 50,000 calls that these monkeys make to each other. And they have come up with patterns, Dave. And now apparently they are saying that they are calling each other by name. They're able to call the attention, get the attention of a particular monkey or group of monkeys by calling them by their name. And they're saying that there is a growing body of studies that suggest a variety of animals are able to use language, if you will, in this way. Um, we humans are so arrogant that we have long believed that no other creature on the planet has language. It's just us. That the other animals are just making sounds. But it sounds like they're communicating in many ways, and this experiment with these monkeys, I mean, it seems to clearly show that not only are they communicating, but they're calling each other out by name, which is pretty unique, pretty amazing. And the professor ends up says kind of conclusionary statement, which resonates with me. And he says many animals are a lot more cognitively sophisticated and have much richer social lives than have been historically recognized. And again, I think that is just kind of arrogance of mankind, just dismissing the animal kingdom as not being intelligent. So I thought it was pretty interesting.
Stu,
So you
what do
had
you
a
think NSA stands for?
National Security Agency.
Well, the joke in Washington, of course, is it stands for no such agency. It's supposed to be
Okay.
secret.
Invisible, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So they now have a podcast. This is straight from their own website,
Wait,
and
NSA
it's
has a podcast?
called No Such Podcast. And they're saying it will bring people to the table from across the agency to discuss our role, our foreign signals intelligence and cybersecurity missions, and so much more. NSA is known as the home of the world's greatest code makers, code breakers. Their stories now are being decoded. They may or may not be better than the Chinese and the Iranians and the Koreans, but they're certainly darn good. And the first episode was about how we found bin Laden,
Wow.
the basics of foreign signals intelligence.
Wow.
And they had, as the guest on that podcast, one of the people who was in the room at the CIA when they got the word that he had been found and killed.
Wow.
Okay, that's something of an expert. NSA generated signals intelligence to help find and ultimately eliminate. In the lead episode of No Such Podcast, learn how NSA helped find bin Laden through foreign signals intelligence. NSA leaders demystify the foreign signal and how each step applied to the Osama bin Laden case.
Wow.
And I'm sure that's true and sure to be interesting, and they'll probably tell the truth. But think about that a minute. They're saying that we are tracking almost every signal on almost every cell phone in Pakistan and everywhere else in the world.
Yeah, especially everywhere else in the world. Well,
The Africans were really upset about that when I spent some time with them, because they were sure they were all being tapped.
That part doesn't surprise me, Dave. The really surprising part for me is that they are actually doing a show, a podcast that talk about this stuff. To me, that's pretty amazing that they're going on Front Street like that, talking about all the nefarious stuff that they do and how they do it.
That's an old reporter's trick. It turns out almost everybody wants to speak proudly of the work they're doing.
Mhm.
So if you let them talk about something they're proud of, they often give away secrets. Although these guys are pros, I don't think they're going to give away anything.
Yeah. I'm sure that's stuff. They're going over that with a fine-tooth comb before that gets put out. But still, it sounds interesting. We should do some follow-up on that, Dave. I'd like to follow with our listeners and viewers, down the road and report on that.
Well, a friend of ours, Emmanuel Goldstein, actually knows Ed Snowden and had him join did a call from Russia to a conference, the Hope Conference a few years ago. So maybe we could get a real expert on.
Wow, that would be fascinating.
Don't expect that'll happen, but
yeah. Okay, we're about out of time. So thank you, Dave. This has been some fascinating stuff, from talking monkeys to Telegram to the latest from Apple and Google. This has been Community and Technology with Dave Bernstein and Stu Reed on WHCR 90.3 FM and on the web at WHCR.org every Wednesday, 5 p.m. Stay tuned. You just might learn something. Thanks. Good night.